Imagine this. Somewhere in northern Italy, behind a set of red gates in a small town called Maranello, there's a factory where supercars worth more than most American homes are still being built, almost like fine Swiss watches. By hand, piece by piece, over nearly 3 months. This isn't just any factory tour. This is a front row seat to see how a flat sheet of metal, a block of molten aluminum, and a hide of leather turn into a 200+ miles per hour Ferrari with your name on the build sheet. Today, we're going inside Maranello's legendary factory to see exactly how Ferrari supercars are handcrafted, step by step, from the moment the engine is born in fire to the instant the finished car fires up for the very first time. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at a Ferrari the same way again, and you might never look at mass-produced cars the same way either. The town that builds dreams. If you drove through Maranello without knowing better, you'd think it was just another quiet Italian town. Narrow streets, low buildings, people grabbing espresso, kids on bicycles. Then, out of nowhere, a bright red blur screams past. The exhaust note echoes between the buildings, and you realize you're in a place where going for a drive means something completely different. Back in 1947, when Enzo Ferrari decided to build road cars to fund his racing, he picked this exact location as the home of his new factory. Since then, Maranello has been less of a town and more of a living ecosystem built around one name: Ferrari. Inside this town sits a 165,000 square meter complex. That's about 1.8 million square feet, dedicated almost entirely to one thing: making sure every car with a prancing horse badge feels like a rolling piece of art, not just a fast appliance. Around 1,300 workers walk into this plant each day, and together they produce roughly 13,700 cars a year. That works out to roughly 50 to 60 cars a day, but each one has around 3 months of human attention behind it before someone hits the start button for the first time. Think about that for a second. In a world where some brands build more than 1 million cars a year, Ferrari intentionally stays in the low tens of thousands. It's not because they can't scale, it's because they don't want to dilute what makes the badge special. And yet, this isn't some old, dark factory from the 1950s. The place looks more like a tech campus meets a modern art museum. Glass, natural light, bright floors, clean lines. The environment is designed so that people can focus on details all day long. But the story of every Ferrari doesn't start with the body or the interior or even the paint. It starts in fire, in a part of the factory that feels more like a forge than a car plant. Birth of the beating heart. Before anything that looks like a car appears, Ferrari creates what they call the heart of the machine, the engine. In a dedicated in-house foundry, aluminum arrives as solid blocks and ingots. These are fed into massive furnaces where temperatures climb to over 1,200 degrees Celsius. Hot enough that the metal doesn't just soften, it turns completely liquid, glowing white-orange. Technicians in heat-resistant suits oversee this process, watching through small windows as the molten metal swirls like lava. This is where a future V8 or V12 starts life, not as a piece of high-precision engineering, but as a shimmering pool of metal. That molten aluminum is then poured into specially designed molds that form the basic shape of the engine block, the cylinder heads, and other key components. Timing here is everything. Pour too fast, you get defects. Too slow, you get incomplete fills. Even at this early stage, nothing is left to chance. The molds, the temperature, the cooling rates, every variable is monitored so that when the cast parts emerge, they're as dimensionally perfect as possible. From there, the cooled castings go into machining centers. Now the rough shapes are milled, drilled, and honed to exact tolerances. We're talking about differences measured in thousandths of an inch, because even tiny errors can become huge problems at high RPM. But here's the key thing to remember. Ferrari calls their approach craftsmanship assembly, automatic control. Humans shape and assemble the soul of the car, while machines check, measure, and verify with zero emotion and zero compromise. Once the engine parts are machined, cleaned, and prepped, they head to one of the most sacred spaces in the entire factory, the engine assembly plant. the hand-built engines. Picture this: you step into a large, clean, quiet hall. On one side, there's a line dedicated to V8 engines, with 32 separate stations laid out in a precise sequence. On the other side, there's a different line dedicated purely to V12S because those engines are so complex they get their own choreography. At each station on the line, a technician is responsible for one specific step. One might install crankshafts and check bearing clearances. The next fits pistons and connecting rods, making sure they glide smoothly inside each cylinder. Another installs cylinder heads, carefully lowering them using special tools so the gasket seals perfectly. Across the hall, V12 specialists are dealing with even more components, more cylinders, more valves, more timing hardware. These engines are longer, heavier, more delicate in some ways, and the people building them are trained specifically for this art. On average, around 147 engines are hand-built in this building every single day. That is a tiny number compared to mass-market engine plants where thousands of engines can roll off in a single shift. But here, the emphasis is not on speed, it's on precision and repeatability with human oversight. Every bolt is torqued by a person who knows exactly what it should feel like when it's right. Every shim and gasket is installed by hands that have done this so many times they can tell if something is slightly off before a machine ever complains. The line is semi-moving. Engines advance from station to station on carts or fixtures, but the pace is controlled. If something needs more time, the process gives it more time. This is not a conveyor belt from a cheap car commercial. This is a measured, deliberate rhythm. And yet, even in this nearly old-school environment, there's one moment where humans step aside and let robots take the lead. Romeo and Juliet, the only robots allowed to touch. There is exactly one step in the Ferrari engine building process that humans do not perform by hand: connecting the valve mechanics on the engine. This job belongs to two robots that work so closely together and with such smooth coordination that Ferrari's chief manufacturing officer nicknamed them Romeo and Juliet. These robotic arms are mounted side by side, moving in perfect sync. They reach into the partially assembled engine and install small, delicate components in the valve train, parts that control how air and fuel flow into the cylinders and how exhaust gases flow out. The movements are fast, precise, and endlessly repeatable. In the time it might take a human to carefully align and bolt a component, the robots can do it with perfect accuracy and no fatigue. This is crucial because tiny errors here can affect engine performance, longevity, and emissions. Romeo and Juliet are the exception that proves the rule. Ferrari trusts humans with the vast majority of tasks, but when a job demands absolutely consistent millimeter-level accuracy, the cold test, when the engine runs without fuel. Imagine mounting a brand new engine on a test stand, connecting it to an electric motor, and spinning it as if it were running at different speeds, without ever igniting a drop of fuel. That's exactly what happens at the cold test bench. Each V8 engine and many other engines are brought to this fully robotic station. An electric motor turns the crankshaft while sensors all around the engine monitor friction, internal pressures, airflows, and vibrations. From the outside, it looks almost eerie. The engine is silent except for a faint whirring sound, yet data is streaming in real time. The computer knows what a perfect Ferrari engine is supposed to feel like at every simulated RPM. If the readings are even slightly outside the acceptable range, the system flags it. That engine doesn't just get a pass because it looks good. It goes back for inspection, adjustments, and sometimes partial disassembly until it meets the standard. This cold test lets Ferrari verify the internal health of the engine without running it hot, without burning fuel, and without risking damage. It's like checking someone's heartbeat, blood pressure, and oxygen levels before they ever run a marathon. Only once the engine passes this exam can it graduate to the next phase, leaving the engine hall and heading toward the vehicle assembly line, where the rest of the car will come to life around it. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the factory, another process has been moving along in parallel: the birth of the chassis and body, where chassis becomes supercars. Every day, a flow of freshly painted chassis arrives at the vehicle assembly line. These are not fully formed cars yet, but they already carry a huge part of each Ferrari's identity, its shape and its color. And color at Ferrari is a big deal. Yes, there's the classic red that most people picture when they hear the name Ferrari, but in reality, more than half of all cars leaving the factory are not red. Customers can choose from around 2 million possible color combinations when you factor in standard shades, historical race colors, special metallics, matte finishes, stripes, roof contrasts, racing liveries, and tailor-made schemes. That means 2 cars built on the same day with the same engine, the same model name, can look completely different just because of how they're painted and detailed. These painted chassis arrive in a carefully sequenced order on giant steel structures called C-hooks. The hooks grab the cars at specific points, suspend them in the air, and move them from station to station, sometimes even rotating them so workers can access different sides without bending and twisting all day. At this stage, the chassis is basically an empty shell. It has the structure, the paint, some mounting points, but no engine, no interior, no wiring. It's like a beautifully painted sculpture waiting to become something functional. This is where the assembly line dance really begins. The assembly line dance. The line is set up with a mix of automation and manual craftsmanship. At some stations, machines handle heavy lifting and precise positioning. Careful robotic arms may place glass or lift major components where human muscles would struggle or risk damage. At other stations, it's all about human hands. Technicians work with pneumatic tools, torque wrenches, and special fixtures, tightening bolts and connecting systems with the kind of fine control that's hard to program into a robot. One of the most fascinating parts of this dance is when the car gets effectively split into 2 worlds, the top and the bottom. The bottom portion of the car sits on a moving cradle. This is where the powertrain goes in, the engine that just passed its cold test, the transmission, the exhaust system, the drive shaft or axles, the suspension components, the brake calipers, and rotors. It's like building a complete mechanical animal from the spine down. Every part is bolted, wired, and connected so that theoretically it could almost function on its own. Meanwhile, suspended above all of this on those C-hooks is the top half of the car. This is the body shell with its doors, roof, pillars, and structural reinforcements. It's where the interior will live, where the electrics will snake through, where the driver and passenger will actually interact with the machine. Technicians route wiring looms through tight channels, install insulation, mount control modules, and prepare mounting points for dashboards, seats, and center consoles. They're also making sure that every sensor, connector, and harness is in the right place, because once the car is fully assembled, some of these parts will be almost impossible to reach. For a while, it's as if Ferrari is building 2 separate machines, a naked mechanical platform and an empty but beautifully painted shell. Then comes the moment that everyone on the line still refers to with a little bit of reverence: the marriage. In the marriage station, the lower cradle with the powertrain and suspension is positioned precisely under the suspended body shell. Slowly, carefully, the body is lowered down. Guides and alignment pins help ensure everything lines up. Engine mounts, suspension mounting points, structural elements. If the engineering and assembly have been perfect up to this point, the body drops onto the drivetrain like a glove sliding over a hand. Bolts are then tightened, connections are made, and in that instant the car stops being a collection of major components and becomes a single, unified vehicle for the first time. From here on out, the focus shifts from raw mechanicals to the part of the car most owners actually live with every day: the interior, leather, imperfections, and human eyes. Somewhere away from the loudest parts of the factory is a calmer, more tactile environment dominated by the smell of leather. Large hides are laid out on inspection tables under strong, even lighting. These hides come from selected suppliers and are already high grade, but Ferrari isn't interested in good enough. Experienced workers walk around the hides, eyes trained to spot even tiny flaws. Scars from when the animal was alive, small holes, stretch marks, subtle differences in grain or color. Wherever they see an imperfection, they mark it by hand. The idea is simple. No visible part of a Ferrari interior should be cut from these flawed sections. Only after the hide is mapped with all these marks does the technology step in. A cutting machine, guided by software, projects cutting patterns onto the leather, automatically avoiding the marked zones and optimizing how the pieces are nested. This minimizes waste while maximizing quality. The most visible parts of the seats, dashboards, door panels, and steering wheels are always taken from the best parts of the hide. Customization: when a Ferrari becomes your Ferrari. Ferrari buyers don't just pick a color and trim level and call it a day. For many customers, especially in the US, the spec process is almost like designing a suit or a watch. Do you want smooth leather or Alcantara or a mix of both? Do you want contrast stitching? If so, what color? Red stitching on black seats or yellow stitching to match your brake calipers? Maybe you want perforated inserts for better breathability or a central stripe that matches the exterior racing livery. Maybe you want the Ferrari logo embossed on the headrests or even your initials discreetly added somewhere. Steering wheels, dashboards, and tight spaces. Ferrari steering wheels today are not just steering devices. They're like mini F1 wheels for the road. You've got the iconic red engine start button, the Maranello switch that lets you toggle between driving modes, paddle shifters, maybe LED shift lights at the top of the wheel that tell you exactly when to pull the next gear. All of this is pre-assembled into a complex unit that needs to be installed with extreme precision. The angle has to be right. The alignment with the wheels has to be perfect. The feel of the paddles, the resistance of the switches, the click of the buttons, all of it matters. Technicians use special fixtures and torque tools to mount the steering wheel on the steering column, making sure everything is straight and secure. One small misalignment here, and a driver who just paid hundreds of thousands of dollars will feel it every time they get behind the wheel. Then there's the dashboard. The dash in a Ferrari isn't just a plastic shell, it's a heavy structure wrapped in leather or Alcantara, filled with vents, screens, wiring, airbags, and structure. Getting this entire unit into the car without damaging the interior is like trying to move a couch into a tiny elevator without scratching the walls. Quality checks, the final exams. Before a Ferrari can roll out of the factory, it has to survive a series of final checks, and these are not just quick glances. First come visual inspections. Panel gaps are measured, not just eyeballed. Technicians look at reflections in the paint to see if there are any waves, distortions, or tiny surface defects. Inside, they check stitching lines, make sure seams are straight, verify that leather pieces match in color and grain, and ensure that all controls feel consistent. Buttons shouldn't wiggle, knobs should turn smoothly, and every switch should click with the same firmness. Then come functional tests. Electronics are powered up, and technicians cycle through menus, test the sound system, check driver assist systems, and make sure all sensors and cameras talk to the car's brain. Mechanically, alignment equipment checks that the wheels are pointing exactly where they should. Brake tests confirm that the system engages with the right force and balance. Sometimes, depending on the model and procedure, cars may be driven on test tracks or special rollers that simulate real-world conditions. The idea is that by the time an owner puts their hands on the wheel, the car has already been treated almost like a patient in a hospital. Scanned, tested, double-checked, and signed off by multiple specialists. The 3-month supercar. From the moment the engine block is first cast in molten aluminum to the moment the completed car rolls toward the exit gates, each Ferrari takes roughly 3 months to build. 3 months of human hands and human eyes catching things that robots might miss. A slightly off shade of leather, a faint noise, a feel that doesn't line up with what a Ferrari is supposed to be. 3 months of robots doing what humans can't or shouldn't do. Lifting massive components, aligning bodies and drivetrains with laser precision, spinning engines in cold tests with perfect repeatability. In those 3 months, one car moves through a chain of about 1,300 people and an entire philosophy. Ferrari's belief that the best way to build a supercar in the 21st century is to blend old-school craftsmanship with high-tech control. And this is just for the current generation of cars. On top of all this, Ferrari has added a brand new e-building, a huge modern facility designed to handle hybrid and fully electric models. That means the same town where fire-breathing V12s are built is also preparing for silent instant torque electric Ferraris. Different powertrains, same obsession with detail. So whether the car you see in the showroom has a screaming V8, a howling V12, or an electric motor, its journey still runs through the same small Italian town and the same culture that Enzo Ferrari started back in 1947. All of that effort, all of that time, all of those decisions collide in one final moment. Walking out of the red gates. Picture this scene. A completed Ferrari sits at the end of the line, paint gleaming under the factory lights. Inside, the leather is smooth and flawless, the stitching perfectly straight, the cabin smelling like a blend of new leather and fresh machinery. Under the hood, or in the middle, depending on the model, is a hand-built engine that survived machining, assembly by specialists, a dance with Romeo and Juliet, and a cold test that measured its inner health before it ever fired. Underneath, the suspension, brakes, and drivetrain are all torqued to spec. Inside, screens light up, the steering wheel buttons respond, and the Maranello waits for someone to twist it into race mode. Somewhere on the build sheet, there's a name. Maybe it's a collector from Miami who's adding this car to a climate-controlled garage. Maybe it's a tech founder from California who plans to daily drive it. Maybe it's someone who dreamt of this car as a kid watching F1 on TV and finally made it. To that person, it's their Ferrari. To Maranello, it's the end result of a 12-week ritual that has been refined for almost 8 decades. And here's the question I want to leave you with. Now that you know it takes 3 months, 1,300 people, an in-house foundry, a pair of robots named Romeo and Juliet, and a factory the size of 30 football fields to build a single Ferrari. If you ever got the chance to own one, would you tuck it away like a priceless museum piece? Or drive it hard on every empty back road you can find? If this inside look at how Ferrari supercars are handcrafted in Maranello gave you a new appreciation for what goes into these machines, hit that like button so more people can discover what's really behind that prancing horse badge. Tell me in the comments. If Ferrari handed you the keys and said, pick any model, which one are you driving out of those red gates first? And where's the very first place you'd go? And if you want more deep dives into how the world's most iconic machines are really made, beyond the marketing, beyond the brochure, make sure you subscribe, share this video with a fellow car lover, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next factory we step inside. Because this was Maranello. Next time, it might be the birthplace of your other dream machine.